Well, for classics from the Romantic era, I'm going to start in Britain and with British poetry. These are still treasured. Let's try this. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. My heart leaps up. That's a romantic impulse. The child is father of the man. See, they idealized youth, too. I should have put that in there. The child teaches the grown-up how to be. He learned to love a rainbow as a child, so adult Wordsworth now knows that. Another of his poems. William Wordsworth was the poet laureate of England. He's one of the only romantics who lived a full life. He lived to be quite old. Most of them died early. I met a little cottage girl. She was 8 years old, she said. Her hair was thick with many a curl that clustered round her head. She had a rustic woodland air, and she was wildly clad. Her eyes were fair and very fair. Her beauty made me glad. Sisters and brothers, little maid, how many may you be? How many? 7 in all, she said, and wondering looked at me. And where are they? Well, it goes on. I can't quote the whole thing, but almost. He has an argument with this little girl. 2 of them are dead. But she says there's 7. She says, no, there's only 5. At the end he says, but they are dead. Those 2 are dead. Their spirits are in heaven. 'Twas throwing words away, for still the little maid would have her will, and said, nay, we are 7. The little girl would not let them go. Her imagination, if you will, kept them alive. She was wiser than the well-educated university guy William Wordsworth, as he wrote it. She was the noble savage and an idealized woman. She could have said, I met a little cottage boy. But no, it was a girl. All I can do is give you tastes of these. Coleridge was a friend of Wordsworth. And 2 of his poems that I'll mention, Kublai Khan, that's the first instance I know of in famous literature where there is drug-influenced literature, other than alcohol. Coleridge had taken laudanum, they called it. It was opium. He was sick. It was legal. It was a legal drug. And he'd fallen asleep and had this wild dream, which when he woke up he remembered and wrote the poem Kublai Khan, describing this paradise in China. There's where we get the word Xanadu. In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man down to an endless sea. Or something like that it starts. Wonderful nonsense to the 18th century. But you see, this is the imagination. And the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, spelled like that because they liked old things. They even liked old spellings. This is a very long poem written in common verse. It was an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of 3. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stoppest thou me? Well, this old skinny guy stops this kid and makes him sit down, and he tells him this long story about a ship that gets blown off course, and the gist of it is this ancient mariner, as a young man, had needlessly killed an albatross, a bird that had flown around the ship. Landed on the deck. It was like a pet to the sailors, and they made him wear it around his neck. So you hear about wearing an albatross around your neck. Well, as his punishment. And it gets worse than that. It is becalmed. They all thirst to death. Day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as silent as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And they thirst to death. He has visions. Eventually he is saved. But then from that point on he has to wander through countries telling his story. And you get to the end and you wonder, well, what's the point? And I think it's pretty clear that the point is he had needlessly killed one of God's creatures for no good reason at all. He'd killed that albatross. And that was such a sin against nature, really, that this was his punishment. Keats, wow. John Keats, he might have been the greatest poet who ever wrote in English if he had only lived longer. He died when he was about 26. But then that was part of it. That was the dark side of Romanticism. So many died early. I think he might have been the one who wrote, I'm almost in love with death. One of them wrote that. I mean, there was a dark side, which I kind of skipped. Anyway, very, very rich poetry. Ode to a Grecian Urn. An ode is when you write something to an inanimate object. You speak to it. Ode to Autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, it starts with. The Eve of St. Agnes is 42 stanzas long. It's a very long poem. It tells a story, and it means a good bit to me because my poetic masterpiece, to the extent that I have one, is called The Eve of Christmas, and I used the Eve of St. Agnes as my model. I made it 42 stanzas long. I think I spoke about this back in December when I was teaching verse. Byron and Shelley were major in their day. Lord Byron, I'm not going to deal with him really because I don't have time. I would. And then Robert Burns. Well, he was Scottish poet. He was the only one who really was a farmer. I suspect Robert Burns often had calluses on his hands from plowing and working. He didn't just talk the talk. He was a farmer. Auld Lang Syne, should old acquaintance be forgotten, never brought to mind. People sing that on New Year's Eve, and that's one of his poems. I never liked that tune much. But he also wrote a poem that I'll draw attention to called To a Mouse. He was plowing, and he turned a mouse's nest up. Behind the plow, he saw what he did, and the mouse was running all over, and he destroyed the mouse's everything. And you know, again, an 18th century person would say, well, what's the point? So what, you know? But to the romantic, he could put himself in the mind of that mouse. And the famous lines that come from that is the best laid, something like, oh, mousie, you are not alone. The best laid plans of mice and men go oft astray. The mouse had done everything to be ready for winter. It was in November. And it was destroyed suddenly through nothing that he had done. And he says the same thing can happen to men. Of Mice and Men became the name of a very famous American novel. And To a Louse, kind of a louse is the singular of lice. And what happened was Robert Burns was sitting in church, and Jenny, I think was her name, came in, feeling real pretty and tossing her hair and wanting everyone to look at her because she felt so pretty in her Sunday clothes. She had this hat. What she didn't know, but everybody else saw, was there was a louse crawling around on the brim of her hat. And the more she did to draw attention to herself, the more people saw that. And she said, at one point he says, oh, Jenny, dinna toss your hair. Don't do that. And the famous line that goes, oh, would some gift give us to see ourselves as others see us. If we only could see what we look like in other people's eyes, we would do many things differently, we would say. There's a movie called Pandemonium, which is about these people. I get it mixed. Oh, Bright Star. I can remember that. Bright Star, I think, is also specifically about Keats, maybe. Pandemonium, I believe, is about Wordsworth and Coleridge and their friend. This one I sort of recommend, but this was a strange time. But if you're interested, I thought I'd at least tell you about that. All right, I'm going fast. See you tomorrow.